Politics Live once again on a Monday night at 7 p.m. I've got David Oldham. David Van with SoonerPolitics.org and David Oldham with ConstitutionalGrounds.com. I'm Tommy McKay. You can catch me at Tom E. McKay on Twitter. And we're going to move on now and talk a little bit about GT Bynum, picked a police chief.
Yes.
And you know, last week we talked about what I call the fake fight. He had the activists all worked up about wanting him to do the national search. And to me, I still stick with that was a fake fight. They just made it easier for him to pick the African American that he wanted to without any blowback from any other people worrying about that.
I wanted him to pick a suburban Republican, and he did.
I was pleased with his choice,
Yes.
and I was pleased that he didn't go national.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and this is, again, your community policing. You're right. It's like, oh, I thought these folks up in the minority groups on the other side of town wanted community policing, except when it came to this.
Except for national,
they wanted
right.
Yeah. Somebody doesn't know Tulsa for squat. They want in charge of our policing.
Exactly.
You know, and I said, well, I don't know Tulsa, but I know Detroit, and I will run you like you're Detroit.
Into the ground. Just like we do it.
Yeah. So yeah, it sounds like a solid guy. I mean, just on the individual things people said about his style, his nature, his diligence, he just has been a clean cop.
Yeah. Well, and he just seems like he's reasonable.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be nice. It'll be nice to meet him and actually have a full discussion with him and see how reasonable he will be.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they will seem reasonable until you start scratching the surface, and then you find out whether they really are.
And we hope that he projects some strength. He seemed to be quite humble, and we hope that, ultimately he'll project some strength. I know that one of the reasons I contend that GT wanted him anyway, regardless of skin color, was because he's data-driven, and that's what GT sells to other cities is his consulting on data for cities. And so that's, it's handy that that's one of the things they want is a data-driven police force. And so that's what he's got. And I don't disagree with every decision GT makes, but he seems to lead from behind.
Yeah,
he doesn't really get up there and do it.
When Bill LaFortune was mayor, and those were bad days, I tell you, we wanted more cops. And he said finally to associate, he says, now you understand, if we get more cops, that means they're going to do more arrests, and our crime rate will go up.
That's true.
Exactly.
That's data driven.
I know.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive, but actually much of our crime is caused by government interference in the first place.
Right.
And as you know, with mental health and everything else, if it weren't for them creating these people and putting them into situations that kind of drive them into it, we wouldn't have a lot of the crime.
Yeah.
A lot of it would die out, and they would be spending their time on real crime instead of the fake stuff.
And we're going to get into that later in the show on court updates, because much like the Blanchard guy, we covered that case. He ended up settling, getting some nice cash, is because they wouldn't leave a guy alone.
Right.
We just want to be left alone. And if some busybody called in that won't name who they are, consider the source, officer. If they can't name and state, I was eyewitness, I actually saw a crime, besides they don't look like they belong in this neighborhood.
Right.
Tell them, leave them, you got to have a crime you want to call the cops.
Well, it is time that the police start educating the public when they make a bad call. And we're not going to say that it's a malicious call, but it's a bad call.
Sure.
And that's happened to me numerous times with First Amendment stuff.
Yeah.
Well, it was incumbent upon the police to go out and educate the guy who had a problem with me just exercising my right.
Yeah.
And so, because they couldn't kick me out. I mean, they had no grounds to do that, so they had to make sure that the other guy left me well alone. And so it got turned around. We're not seeing that with the gun issues in the park and things like that. No, somebody called it in, so we're going to SWAT the guy.
Right.
That kind of a thing. And it's like it's flipped around. And where's the investigation on the caller and the discussion with the caller?
And here's my problem with the snowflake left. is they think that because I'm offended, now that is grounds for police action.
Right.
You know, you will literally be harassed by cops if you're scaring people. Well, it's that narrative they're being taught.
People.
Yeah,
and they're like this.
It's tattle on the bully mentality. They're not responsible for their own feelings. They've got to make sure and tattle. This guy, he hurt my feelings.
Well, look what it's doing. Like our Constitution says, you have a right to bear arms.
Right.
But if you bear arms and it scares people, they feel they have a right to arrest you for harassing people, scaring people. Well, you just have to question, should you be scared? Is it your own fault you're scared? Or is it because there's some fearmonger taught you to be afraid?
Right.
You know, that's...
Well,
that's
and that comes down to the duties of liberty.
Yeah.
Because if you're demanding all this government force be used in your stead, and you're demanding that it be done, you're calling the cops on everybody, then you are violating your liberty to live at peace with your neighbors, because you're actually calling in the gang, calling in the warlord on your neighbors.
Yeah,
that's
You're
a declaration of war.
The legal plunder.
And let me tie this into your first story about Bernie Sanders here. A government that has enough power to meet all your needs and provide all your goodies under the things rights.
Right.
That kind of government has enough power to just squelch all of your rights.
Right.
And you can't have it both ways, folks. AC